I've solved the Illuminati dolphin from the second Spongebob film. You may have missed it because, fair warning, this is actually the second half to that video, so if you've missed my entire proposition of what Gary is, click the box in the top right corner now and watch that video first, because today I'm here to finish it. I'm here to discuss evidence that commenters brought to the table, I'm here to officially diagnose Gary, and more pressingly, I'm here to finally do a deep delve into Gary's twisted inner reflection, Bubbles the bottlenose dolphin. Hello again, I'm the Theorizer, and as ridiculous as this whole situation is, I will tell you again, it is the most probable solution to all of the physically impossible things Gary does. A recap. Based on multiple instances of parallel proof, I concluded that it was merely possible that Gary the snail used to be whatever Bubbles is from Sponge Out of Water, mainly because Gary's self-image is highly similar to the likes of Bubbles. But what really intrigued me was my additional spontaneous dissection of what Bikini Bottom is, and what exactly the whole dynamic is between this dolphin alien race and the dimensions they traverse. The best technical way to describe the observations seen from the film is that this omniscient alien race we know as the Illuminati is actually composed of fourth-dimensional beings that appear to us as sea creatures. They watch over us and prevent catastrophe on a galactic scale because it would seem as though there is some sort of threat that needs to be blocked. As to what that threat is, I wasn't certain, and I'm still not, but I've got many ideas based on intuitive presumption. First of all, it's either an individual or a group that is threatening existence. If it's an individual, it's most likely a rogue member of this marine race. If it's a group, it is most likely a competing interdimensional race of sea creatures, so is Gary a part of this Illuminati, or is the solar system trapped in a war between an advanced race of dolphins and an advanced race of the sea snails? I'll be more specific. As you know, this fourth-dimensional 3D tetrahedron thing has a direct temporal spatial link to Bikini Bottom. I determined Bikini Bottom to be some sort of 2.5-dimensional flatland beneath the ocean. This link is proven when Plankton's time machine glitches out of time and into outer space, and more pressingly, it is proven when whatever Gary is teleported from there to Bikini Bottom, and became this disgruntled, apathetic mollusk. But here's the big one. When I was writing that script, I sat there for quite a while and debated to myself whether or not I should include something particularly interesting. You see, in the past, only once or twice, I have used evidence that could be seen as visually subjective. Evidence that could be a visual coincidence. For example, in my 12th theory on the film Coraline, I claimed I could see the face of another character hidden in the darkness, but it could have just been the way I'd brightened it. This is very tricky to try and pass off as valuable evidence because some people can't see it, and Coraline in particular was stop motion. But I say all of this because I chose not to mention it in that Gary theory. I waited. I sifted through all of the comments I could, and now I feel completely comfortable sharing this little detail because I was not the only one who saw this exact same thing, and came to the exact same conclusion independently. Here's the image. Now, normally I wouldn't call out any odd patterns in something as vast and random as a nebula, but last video I mentioned the dolphin shapes, which were extremely intentional and actually photoshopped in. The only other thing I held back was, well, do you see it? Because a lot of people, in fact, did, as I showed the image while describing this ulterior malevolent force. It's what can be perceived as a much more indistinct, much more subtle model of what this series shows to be a snail, with the exact same open mouth as an aggressive Gary. Now, this is tricky, and a little subjective, of course. It's an observation, not my final damning piece of evidence at all, but we know that the animators have already altered this photo once. This isn't just me taking a shot in the dark, but it would be beautifully fit with what I've been saying. that the dolphins are defending the solar system, and the threat, the logically necessary force that they are protecting it against, are at war. There are 2 dolphins and a single snail, which to me would imply the individual threat is the case, meaning Gary alone, meaning my offhand comment about him colliding the planets during his psychokinetic unbridled sleep time rage during the reign of Snail King is right, and he collided them using his real-life shoe-eating poem dream capabilities, as we see during the highly coincidental time when he's lost control in the film from no Krabby Patties. Bubbles claims to be watching over for like 10,000 years, though, and Gary's snail form is not that old, so perhaps an entire evil race as opposed to one rogue Illuminati member is still plausible, especially if that is not a snail in the nebula. Back to Bubbles, though, and here's where it gets interesting. In part 1, I also nonchalantly said it was Bubbles' chosen destiny to protect Bikini Bottom because it is a treasured little pocket dimension. Yes, dimension, not a pocket universe, a dimension, at a nexus between width and height. I mean, all the characters are 2D, and yet they roam an environment comparable to 3D, but not at all similar to what's going on in the actual 3D environment on land. When we see them there, they are dried up hyper-realistic marine life, aside from when, ding ding ding, Bubbles converts them to proper land dwellers. Bubbles left the physically impossible collision of 2 gas giants to a couple dimension-and-a-half lower beings because it was either a lazy test or because he wanted to be fired. Laid off, like Gary, so he could aid in the salvation of Bikini Bottom, so that the imminent problem, Gary, could be fixed. As he raps later about saving patties in the past, that place is probably millions of years in our future, and yet it has a direct space-time past tie. Wonderful. He couldn't leave then, but now he can. The Gary life. Now, I must say, I did get a commenter who pointed out that in the episode Spongebob, a magic dolphin came to town, claimed he was from an ancient warrior race, and told them how to stop a volcano from erupting. He claimed his people were wiped out. Now, this magic dolphin seems delusional, and I cannot be sure whether he's just another fan of the stories of these aliens, like the Cephalopod Lodge, or if he is a banished member, like Gary, in the process of memory loss and slow degradation. He feels more like a beta version, what with his bootleg magic and questionable accent, but it proves my point yet again. There are offshoots of Bubbles everywhere, and it's quite possible that things like snail plasma and doctors like this clueless and dubious man are intentional suppressants. Just look at what it did to Spongebob. Now, finally, onto the Gary evidence. I got most of it already. A lot of people, as usual, misinterpreted what I said in the video, but not in a particularly bad way. It happens too much. I say a ton of stuff very fast and describe my thoughts with large words as offhand comments, and people try to figure out exactly what I've just said. During them trying to figure it out and process through my babbling, they have a realization and comment their little theory without realizing it's just what I've said in the video, and well, that they've processed what I've said. This was most of the evidence I received, but in general, it's all the same. Gary just knows things. He can communicate his thoughts quite well most of the time and is receptive to others, like his speech up on stage, which Sandy claimed displayed his wonderful way with words. Many pointed out how he manifests limbs in real life too, and how he just gets everything. It should be obvious at this point that Gary is not what he seems, and that simply, in fact, what Bubbles is just fits best of all probabilities. And considering that crazy bootleg Bubbles, things only click more and more. Here's a big one that I noticed when browsing through a few of Gary's best. We have explicit evidence of him teleporting and floating like Bubbles. Look at this. Look! I mean, how much more do we need? He shares, down to a detailed and predicted skill set, the same abilities as Bubbles. And of course, there's all of the obvious comparisons too, like the visual and the auditory. They're cut from the same cloth, but I don't know if Gary was ever an observer. You may have missed some additional evidence I found when editing too. I snuck it in the video a little bit, but I have to elaborate on that a bit too. In his library, he calls dreams windows to another realm, which is almost like just dancing around the concept of his fourth-dimensional time-shifted innards and their stratospherically Jovian origins. He also describes his life in Bikini Bottom as having many earthly limitations, implying that yes, he is not very earthly and does not belong here. He even chose the body of an heir directly related to Patrick for some reason, and more pressingly, it looks as if he doesn't even have a mother, which is odd because usually maternal relationships are more commonly known on family trees given the concept of birth. The one thing I finally want to discuss, though, is the book. Gary is a library of knowledge, and the choice to display his knowledge this way is what gets me, because it is the exact same concept as this prophetic book that details the story of Bikini Bottom. The book that allows everything written inside of it to come true. It was written by the dolphin race and predicts the future. Why is the Spongebob's second movie so important? Why is it the moment of the prophetic book? Because it's the moment Bikini Bottom, the 2.5D, interacts with the 4D, the dolphins, the people who run the show. Bubbles is tied to said book because it uses similar magic and can undo and redo what he has done himself. If I recall, there was a video game made based on the movie in which the plot was Bubbles asking the Bikini Bottomites to recollect all of the missing pages for him. This book originated on the Bikini Atoll island above Bikini Bottom, which was known, no joke, in real life for being a nuclear testing site. Yes, there have been many theories circulating in the past about how these testings created Bikini Bottom, and knowing what we know now about Bikini Bottom being a dimensional anomaly, this isn't too far-fetched, and in fact gives me core-shaking flashbacks to Twin Peaks: The Return. Point is, this book was being guarded on the island and was most likely put there by the dolphin race, which would mean they know about Bikini Bottom, and basically all of this wraps around and proves it's all connected, and that the dolphins had a hand in the creation of this dimensionally ripped Bikini Bottom, hence the portal being opened and the tie being made, and all of this working like the nuke ripping through a fourth dimension. And while I'm not fully on board with that classic theory of SpongeBob and friends are the product of a nuke, I am agreeing that those most likely have a hand in it, or in the least, they'd alerted the dolphin race to the world's primary nuclear testing ground, which, given time, prophetic books, and a lengthy interdimensional explanation, all connects. And I mean, even Bikini Atoll on land transforms into 2.5D madness when a godforsaken hand converts it, causing Bubbles to appear not minutes later with full knowledge of SpongeBob, the song, the TV show, everything. It's like Bubbles is the watcher of the TV show in this scene. We hear him speak from behind us in the audience when they sing the song, which also fits with, as a commenter pointed out, the dolphin censorship that covers the Sailor Mouth episode. They are the filter through which we witness the show, in which case, since we're also watching the movie, what does that make us? Bubbles is a being of pure light who shoots red lasers out of his blowhole. Is he defending the universe from us, or are we just the true ones who watch all? So, what's the final verdict? Well, given that it's one of the better possible solutions I've thought of for all of the odd behavior inside of Gary, here's the diagnosis. Gary is a fourth-dimensional marine alien from the far reaches of space who was ejected by the Illuminati to Bikini Bottom, probably for creating a book that channels their power, where he's since become an apathetic nihilist disgruntled at the limitations of his new form, an intelligent and omnisciently remnant gastropod mollusk. Bikini Bottom is an anomaly, a split-dimensional abnormality. When its Krabby Patty feng shui, or whatever, was thrown off, Gary was as well, as were the planets Saturn and Jupiter, which, due to being located next to the 4D space station, have entangled with Bikini Bottom for their anomalous dimensional qualities. Quantum fragilities, indeed. So that's that. Not as much a diagnosis video as usual. I will probably comment more insanity if need be, because we just solved Bikini Bottom's origins, and of course we've previously solved how the lesser citizens function too, like the chocolate guy. But who do I target next? Sandy? Karen? Comment below. I am desperate for another question to answer. I'm good at that, not so good at knowing what needs solutions though. This is a hell of a way to start 2020, so until next time, fellow 5-dimensional hands, I'm the Theorizer.